Hi there. This video is going to talk about what's new in the 2024 first release. We released it in March and we added support for the newest LTS Java version, Java 21. We also added support for Jakarta EE. We updated the Eclipse version that our IDE is based on, and we added an SQLJ generator. So let's dive right in. First, we've certified version 2024 R1 for execution with Java 8, 11, 17, and 21. Now these are Oracle's LTS or long-term support versions. And as always, we support all the open Java brands. Now related to this support for Java 21, we've made UTF-8 our default file encoding on Windows platforms. You can change that if you need to with the -D file encoding flag in your startup options. ISCOBAL's IDE uses Eclipse as its base, and we've updated the version of Eclipse for better performance, better stability, and more usability. The IDE is a Java application, and it requires at least Java 17 to run, though you can still compile and run your programs with any LTS version from 8 to 21. Just as the SDK does. The new features of this IDE include text editor support of multiple selections so that most edit operations can be applied to multiple places in the text. The title bar's dark theme on Windows now uses Microsoft's default dark theme, and the default file encoding is UTF-8 in Windows, in addition to all the other platforms that we previously supported. The 2024 R1 adds Jakarta support to our suite of products. Now, Jakarta is the upgraded version of JEE, and it's used for servlet version 5 containers. During this transition times, our products will support both JEE and Jakarta. For instance, Jakarta is needed for Tomcat 10 and JEE for Tomcat 9 and below. Let's talk about how that support is done in our products. When Web Client is executed with the wrappers that we provide, it'll use the embedded Jetty server. But if you decide to run Web Client in your own servlet container, like Tomcat for instance, you can choose which specification to use, and we'll see that in the demonstration later. ISCOBAL servlets and web services support both Jakarta and JEE in 2024 R1, so you can continue to run in older versions of Tomcat and similar web containers, as well as the new ones using the servlet version 5. You can decide which specification to use by including the correct version of the web.xml. The ISCOBAL installation includes both the web.xml with Jakarta support and an alternate XML called web.jee.servlet.xml with JEE support. Just rename that to web.xml if you need to use the JEE. And that's it. You don't have to do anything else because we've included support for both Jakarta and JEE in our iscobal.jar. WebDirect now has its own setup. That's separate from the SDK setup. When you install WebDirect, you can choose which servlet or servlets you want to support. The last Jakarta EE support is integrated in the IDE. When you want to make a WAR file for your project, you can choose the servlet type you want, and the IDE will include the correct XML document for that type. Now, if you run batch programs containing embedded SQL and access data from an Oracle or a DB2 database, now you can use SQLJ to cut your processing time. SQLJ bypasses the JDBC connection step, and our tests show that it can save you almost 40% of your processing time. To generate SQLJ code for your embedded SQL, use the -SQLJ compiler option. The compiler will write the SQLJ source and use the SQLJ translator to create a class and a profile file. Now on the screen is an example of what SQLJ looks like compared to the ESQL doing the same thing. Not all SQL is compatible with all databases, so if you want to access more than one database with your code, you may need to modify your embedded SQL for the specific database. We always try to make code changes like this easier, and in 2024 R1 we've added a preprocessor functionality to the static code that's between the exec SQL and the end exec statements. You can compile your code for different databases without actually changing your programs manually. For instance, your programs may have a select statement in several places to get the current date in Oracle. If you want to offer your customers a choice of Oracle or DB2, you would need to change that code because DB2 uses a different method of getting the date. You can write the new code in a preprocessor Java or COBOL program and have the compiler replace the code every time it encounters it. Though a preprocessor will handle the static SQL, the dynamically generated queries may also need to change for the different database. So we've added a configuration variable, isCOBOL ESQL prepare handler, to call a class automatically after each ESQL prepare statement. The class will alter the query statement before it gets executed. The third addition in 2024 R1 to help you when working with different databases is to handle the different status codes that each database uses. You can use a class to map the codes correctly for the database that you're running in. Each of these options is demonstrated with a sample program in the compiler pre-process sample folder. And speaking of DB2, we've added some features to be more compatible with the DB2 database, including exposing ESQL cursors to the callers, so you can share sets of data with Java programs, and supporting the with return clause in cursor declarations, so that the cursor can be left open without a fetch statement. Other languages let you declare a local variable in a block of code instead of in the working storage section, and isCOBOL does that too in 2024 R1. The top sample is the usual way to create an index for your perform statement by using an index defined in working storage. The bottom sample uses a variable that's not included in the working storage. The asInt statement tells the framework to use a primitive type of integer, and this performs better. It's also unique because it's created just for that perform, and it's thread safe. Autoboxing. This refers to the ability to mix Java and primitive types with COBOL variables in the same statement. In 2024 R1, we've made major improvements to the autoboxing. Now you can compare a Java primitive type with a COBOL variable. You can do arithmetic operations using both types. And you can use arithmetic operations on parameters that are used in call and invoke statements. A new compiler switch -edm will create an XML file with the application's data map. Everything in the data division will be included. We added this for our customers who wanted to use external analysis tools, or for the customers that want to import the XML to a relational database. The accompanying switch -edo can be used to specify the location of the data map output file. The report section is a COBOL section supported by IBM, and we've had support for the report section for quite a while. But now we've expanded that support to include the line limit clause. Any characters beyond that limit are truncated. numval is a function that converts an alphanumeric variable to a numeric variable. numval-c does the same with values containing currency signs and commas. And in 2024 R1, we've added numval-f, which will convert number strings with an exponent value. When you're looking at a log file with multiple threads, it can be confusing which thread a line is referring to, especially if the paragraph names are the same. Now these threads are identified in the log file. A new variable lets you control the keystroke to paste text from the clipboard. In the code on the screen, mrdw is the key combo for the right mouse button, and that's the default value of the variable. But the code snippet also adds the *p, which means the user can also use Control P. The second line there for isCOBOL terminal paste key uses the *v to set Control V to paste. $param size returns the size of a parameter received from a calling program, and $d_arg returns some more information about the parameter. Now we've added $param name to get the name of the parameter. mouse rollover colors have been added to the grid. We're going to see it later in the demonstration, where the whole row is recolored and the heading of a column is recolored when the mouse rolls over it. This is helpful to know where the cursor is, and it's something that the users are getting used to when they use other applications. Now you can use regular expression filters in controls that accept data. For example, in this code, the entry field accepts letters without spaces, the combo box accepts letters and spaces, and the grid accepts numbers and colons in the third column and only numbers in the last column. There have been several Jiffy enhancements in recent versions, and even more in 2024 R1. I want to highlight all of them again, including the new views with their filterable and fast-loading controls, support for multiple O1 level descriptions, returning more file information in a whole file list view that includes a whole file search, and new icons using the font Awesome font. We'll look at this more in a demonstration. So let's get started with that demonstration. As I always do, I'll start with the IS samples. Now note that I'm using the SDK that was installed at the same time as the IDE, is COBOL Evolve. That saved me from having to install both of them in separate installations. So we'll run the samples program. And under new features for 2024 R1, we'll start with the input filter. Now this filter will let you put in letters, but no numbers, which I'm typing, and no spaces. The combo box will let you put spaces in. That's the \S in between the two A through Z's. So I can type, for instance, that with some spaces. And in the grid on the third column, which is length, I can change this using numbers and a colon, but nothing else. The second sample is the grid rollover colors. Now remember, when you roll over the row, the color changes. When you roll over the heading, the color changes. And these are both new in 2024 R1. And we have a sample that will run multiple threads and then show you the log file. So I'm going to leave all the defaults here and start processing. And this sample, when it's done, displays the information. You can see we've done several threads. Thread 3, we're up to thread 8, thread 9, and each thread is identified in the log file. Now let's close these. I want to run a WAR file with the new Jakarta EE. I have started Tomcat 10, which will use the Jakarta, and I verified that it's running. And I'm going to open up the IDE, and I have our sample, our sans rest sample, and I've compiled it, and I'll run it to make sure that it will run within the Jetty container that comes with the IDE. So we're going to run this as an EIS servlet. And here's the program running when we click on first. All right, so this is working. Now I want to create a WAR file within that IDE and then launch it in the Tomcat. So we'll export. Under is COBOL, the project is a WAR file, sans rest. And here I can choose JEE or Jakarta. I have Tomcat 10, so I need Jakarta. Go to next, and I'll just keep all the defaults. Next. I want to save it to my temp directory, and I'll call it sans rest Jakarta, and we'll click on finish. We'll go to Tomcat, the manager app, and we'll come down to choose that file that we just created. There it is, and we'll deploy it. And then we will run it. And it works great. So there's the new Jakarta EE running in Tomcat from a WAR file that we created in the IDE. Now the last thing I want to show you is the Jiffy utility. So I just type in Jiffy, and we'll go out and get a file that has more than one file definition. I've created one called Tourist Info, and I'll make it IO. Here is the 2024 Jiffy. There are 3 tabs up here, and the new one is the list view, and it will list all of the records. Now this one only has 12, but if I had more, it would load the first 100, and I could either fetch them all or go get another 100. I still have my field view and the byte view. And if I want to modify one of these, I can click on it and it'll open it up in field view, so I can change this. You notice the icons up here are the Font Awesome icons. I think they're very modern looking. Under the File menu, I have a list of the recent files that I've had open, and I can get information about this file here. And I can also find out what the 2 conditions are for each of the O1 levels. You might notice under List View and under Field View, I can now search for text, and the same with the List View. And that's a quick look at the 2024 Release 1. I hope you give it a try. If you have any questions, you can contact us at support@veryant.com. Thank you.